coming to you live from deep within a very icy radioactive wasteland, like the most icy it has been all year. Actually, even last year too. We are not me. We are the survivors of the alt-right Keck apocalypse. The few, the brave, the bitchy, once more wading into battle against the feminist
government-funded
Fetty. I'll just call them Fetty. Feminist Fetty hordes with Fetimist hordes with taxpayers. Men are funding discrimination against men. Taxpayers. And this is Rantzerker number 235. I got it this time. And I'm your host, Alison, and I'm with Brian and the estimable Hannah.
And Jojo.
And Jojo. Oh, we do have a Jojo.
Yeah.
All right. So today we're going to be talking about all of the USAID that's being funneled into feminist initiatives around the world that incidentally most of these countries do not want in the first place. I'm pretty sure most of it's just going to bureaucrats' pockets and maybe a few people on the ground. But for the most part, this is a do not want situation. I've actually talked to people from countries like Nigeria, and they don't want this stuff in their country. They would prefer it. No, they shouldn't. They don't want it. But anyway, USAID is exporting it around the world. And it is feminist. So we're all paying, or at least you Americans, probably Canadians as well, because we have our own silly initiatives. So we're all paying for this, folks.
I'm willing to bet.
Downtrodden underdog ideology that can't get a break. We're all paying for it.
Yeah. Well, I'm willing to bet money that every Western country and probably most Eastern countries are invested in the same kinds of initiatives. They just haven't been discovered in those countries yet.
I've just learned.
They're all doing it.
Yeah. I've just learned that the Ottawa, our dear masters and mistresses in Ottawa have decreed that Canadian banks need to disclose their diversity, equality, and inclusion statistics about the people running the banks, because that's what's important here when it comes to banks.
Yep.
Not whether they know what they're doing.
No.
But, and we hear all the time about DEI and race and DEI and religion and DEI and gender identity status and all that. Mm. It's all really about women.
Yep.
It's all really about women. And it's all really about using gynocentrism to gain power over institutions and the people who run them, the people who use them and rely on them to be able to exercise their power. If you run a business, any kind of institution, you have to rely on banks. You can't just pay cash for everything, right? And so, especially if you do international business, it's not like you can just go to your consumers or the people that work for you if it's international. Alison knows this. We've had that issue of I'm not happy with PayPal, but if I don't want to use PayPal, she's got to send me checks, and that takes longer. And these are things that every business that does anything internationally, which is more and more now, you have to go through banks, and there's no getting around it. So if you control the banks, you control everybody. I want to point out something too about the USAID thing. In the United States, USAID is one funding initiative. We have thousands, and with dozens of departments. If you go to, there's a Wikipedia page for this. It's fairly accurate, has the number of departments and agencies. And it's not just this one long list of departments and agencies. You have to click on the letter of the alphabet to get a list of the departments and agencies for that letter of the alphabet. I think there might be one or two letters, that are obscure, don't usually start words that you would use for a department name that maybe don't have some, but then there are others that there are dozens on the list. And pretty much all of them are funding feminist initiatives. So this isn't just USAID, it is very widespread. This isn't just a rabbit hole, it's a whole rabbit warren of rabbit holes.
There you go. It's like cockroaches. If you see one, there are thousands in the walls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but it is good that we are seeing this one. Now we know we have an infestation, or at least people who were not paying attention before and are paying attention now will see that. So, should we, because there's a lot to cover. So, should we start, dive in? What are we doing?
Well, maybe we should give a little bit of context to some of the language that's used, because I know that people have questioned it.
Yeah.
So when these reports say something like gender sensitive, they mean feminist. They mean to look at a situation through a feminist lens. So, for example, gender sensitive when it comes to domestic violence is things like the primary aggressor law, which usually results in arrest of the man. And also all of the feminist initiatives, for example, in the US, that make it so that a police department is investigated if their arrests of women get too high. And they instituted this as a result of a while back, and Hannah could probably correct me because she's got the dates and everything, I'm sure. They started, feminists demanded that domestic violence result in arrest. So if cops were called out to a domestic violence incident, somebody had to be arrested. But this policy, while it did increase arrests of men, it increased arrests of men by about maybe from 100 to 160. But arrests of women went from 100% before to something like 2,000-3,000 times higher.
It was so I wrote about this for that video we made during the Johnny Depp hearing, where he talked about the history of domestic violence response, basically the legal and social response. So the government and the people in a community, how did they respond to domestic violence throughout history? And throughout history, we'll just cover the fact that throughout history, when the abuser was male and it was one way, not only was there a legal response going back to before the United States existed, in fact, before voting in Western culture existed, there was a legal response even in the 13th century. So this whole thing that it used to be legal for men to abuse their wives, and then all of a sudden feminists came along. That's bullshit. So we'll start there. But in the 80s, feminists started pushing for automatic arrest policies every time the police were called to somebody's home for domestic violence. Because because of feminism, domestic violence is the label for everything from if you get yelled at by your partner, you're a victim of domestic violence, to if your partner tries to kill you. And that label really covers a lot of ground in between. If you do something wrong to your partner and your partner yells at you, hey, stop it, it's considered domestic violence that's just gone both ways, and so it's, domestic abuse that's gone both ways. So they want people to get arrested who have had a loud argument and then resolved it themselves without hitting each other or doing anything otherwise illegal, stuff that if two men in a bar did it for 5 minutes and then said, okay, we're going to cool it down, let's just settle this over a beer, nobody would call the cops. Nobody would want them arrested. Some people might not want to sit with them, but, aside from that, it'd be settled. No problem, right? But if it's a couple in their home and they do it, suddenly it's now an arrestable offense, right? So researchers that looked into this discovered that, let's see, in California, the enhanced arrest policies, and I wrote, this is what I wrote, enhanced arrest policies designed to increase law enforcement response to intimate partner violence caused the number of arrests of men to increase by 37%, but the number of women arrested increased by 446%. And that was just arrests. Convictions for an offense following a domestic violence related arrest grew by 131% for males, but 1,270% for females, and post-DV arrest incarceration rates were up 156% for males, but 1,683% for females. And what the researchers, because it was feminist researchers that discovered this, they concluded that it was a backlash against women. It didn't occur to them that when you look at domestic
I'm sure
violence
it did
from the
occur to them.
standpoint that
I'm
certain
sure it
behaviors,
did occur to them. They just said-
they look through things through such an ideological lens that I think they really believe this shit. I think they really believe that. Well, there's a mental exercise I do with people when I try to get them to understand the social attitudes toward violence, right? So you're at a bus stop and you see a man there and you see a woman there, and one of them says something just absolutely reprehensible, sexually explicit and abusive to the other one, and the other one hauls off and slaps the speaker across the face, just absolutely, bitch slaps across the face. How dare you say that to me, right? If the speaker is a man, people think that the woman is justified because it's an assault to say something sexually aggressive and offensive to a woman, right? But if it's the other way around and the speaker is a woman and a man hits her, people will have all sorts of excuses for why what she said wasn't that bad, and a man should never hit a woman under any circumstances. And if you change the thing to one person pulls out a knife and the other person hits the knife wielder so hard that the knife wielder falls to the ground unconscious, right? If it's a woman that does the hitting and the man who was the knife wielder, people would cheer. But if it's a man who does the hitting and the woman was the knife wielder, people will question, how do you know she was going to stab that guy? People, if she's even coming at him and you can say she raises the knife up and comes right at him, like, movie style, not how you would actually attack somebody with a knife, but they would still, well, she's ineffective. She doesn't know what she's doing. She's not strong enough. He should have restrained her, everything in the world. But okay, he was just defending himself. And that attitude, that's not just feminist. That's gynocentric. And it's throughout society. It permeates most people's households, most people's subcultures that they live in, whatever church they go to, whatever school they go to, whatever workplace environment they're in, their family. The idea that when a woman is violent, she's less dangerous automatically because she's a woman. And when a man is violent, he's more dangerous automatically because he's a man. That a woman's violence can be justified by what the target of that violence does, and that a man's violence is never justified if the target is a woman, no matter what she has done. That creates a situation where when these researchers look at this information, they just assume that these situations are men who assaulted women, and then the women fought back. And when they fought back, they caused injury, and then the cops arrested them because they fought back. But in reality, there's a lot of evidence that not only is domestic violence primarily perpetrated by women when it's only one direction, but that when it's two direction, so both sexes are perpetrating, it's more frequently perpetrated by women, which means that sometimes within those two-way settings, it's still one way from the women.
And all of that relates to what the language is in regards to feminist bureaucracy or aid. So when they say gender sensitive, they mean arrest the man, or they mean focus on women, or they mean look at how women are victims of a thing. So it's always comes back to the feminist lens, which is men are perpetrators, women are victims. And so that language is sort of a red flag, essentially.
It's about
men are perpetrators, women are victims, but it's also men are dangerous, women are vulnerable.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, I was just saying the reason why you have to pay attention to the language is because we know that the term feminist comes with baggage, and there's like some negative connotations associated with it, and that sentiment is growing all the time. So they have to rebrand, but it's the same crap. They're just calling it something new. It's kind of like how DEI was fell out of popularity, and so it got rebranded and changed to something called Bridge, or there was a Jedi. Like, they've done this multiple times, but ultimately it's the same ideology. They're just trying to rebrand it, because ultimately what we're dealing with is people who are very good at marketing very bad ideas. So and we have to just maneuver around the marketing. So yeah, it's a rebrand.
It's important to focus on the feminism, because the feminism is basically the root system from which everything else comes. Everything else. And the reason why I say that is because when they construct their network, their supply lines, they start with feminism because of what Hannah said. It segues into an already existing bias that we have to benefiting women, to protecting women from men, to providing for women, to ensuring women are safe. And so they build that kind of resource base on that. And then after they've built the resource base, they construct additional initiatives to acquire more resources based on advocacy for all of these other groups that in some ways are a symptom of the breakdown, I think, in the relationship between men and women more than anything, caused by feminist initiatives and feminist beliefs about the relationship between men and women being characterized as oppressive. So all of that, the attitude that men oppress women causes a breakdown in the relationship between men and women. And from that comes everything else. And then feminists turn around, advocate for these issues because they're sources of additional funding. And when they're found out, they disavow and they almost jettison them like a lizard jettisons its tail. So everybody goes after that, and the body is protected. And when it's safe, out pops another tail. So we are never going to get rid of this corruption and this graft and this grift without addressing feminism and the root system from which it springs. And that's what we're here for. That is what we're doing today. All right. So
you want to do some? I got a super chat, but do you want to do the things before we get into it?
Oh yeah, that's right. I haven't done the things for a while. I didn't do it with our esteem, or I don't want to use the same word. Our incredibly productive conversation that we had yesterday. I'll put it that way. All right. So if you would like to send us a tip and a comment, please go. You can do so at feedthebadger.com/justthetip. Once again, that's feedthebadger.com/justthetip. The very best way for you to send us some funds and also send us a comment to read on air. And you can do that at any time. You can send us a message at any time. We will receive it. We will ponder it, and we will read it out at the next show. If it's related. If it's completely unrelated, maybe not, but we will read it out at some point. So feedthebadger.com/justthetip. And if you would like to support the show outright, you just want to say, hey, keep this going, go to feedthebadger.com/support. It's very, very much appreciated, because we continue to be able to do this content despite being in the crosshairs of an entire alphabet of agencies and the algorithm. We continue to do this content because you continue to support its construction. So feedthebadger.com/support to do that. All right. Shall we just get into the
So what do we want to start with? We're looking at a website called USAspending.gov.
Oh, I thought we were doing super chows and super chats.
Oh, I got a super chat. I didn't get any super chows, did I? No, nothing yet. But
send in those super chows. They're the best.
Xerax gave us a $5 super chat and says, hilarious considering many react as though violence is justified, Hannah. And you see this when they try to talk a man down or push/restrain a woman. Okay. So let us get into so the topic. Thank you for that, Xerax. So Hannah said, and I thought I would do this. Maybe we'll start with, just so we can see how deep the rabbit hole begins. We went to this website called usaspending.gov, and I just searched the key role feminist and came up with all of these results. And there's like various tabs, right? So there's 9 contracts, 101 grants, 5 direct payments, 21 loans, and 9 other. And these are the list of various recipients and the obligations that they are receiving, and look at how many millions of dollars. I think it's actually sorted by amount. So at the top, you have the highest amount. So $6
Something else
million
to know about that.
to
When you see
Pact
this,
Inc. Yeah, go ahead.
the contracts are specifically to do something the government hired them to do. The grants, people make these proposals, and somebody has to read the proposal and approve of the research or whatever else they're getting a grant. We're going to build something. Okay, what are you going to build? This is the parameters. This is what it's for. This is who it's going to serve, and so on. And they decide yes or no on that. Loans are a different story. What I discovered was a lot of the loans were they were companies that had something feminist on their website or feminist in their name or whatever, but they were COVID loans. So the government, anybody that said they needed a COVID loan to keep their business running, be able to pay their employees and not go out of business during the COVID crisis, got an amount of money. They got basically whatever they asked for. And so there were not just
Feminist Women's Health Center.
Not just
Majority
organizations
Foundation.
that,
right.
And there were a lot of these organizations that got their employees were paid to stay home through these loans, or they weren't bringing in money because people couldn't patronize their business or people weren't donating. But like when you look at names like Feminist Women's Health Center, so at least in Ohio, most places you could go for medical attention were not closed. So a lot of these places said, we don't have people coming in. We don't have money coming in. We're not getting insurance payments. We can't pay our employees. We need this loan. And the loan's guaranteed. They don't have to pay it back. So it's basically a grant, but they didn't call it that. And even though it says Women's Health Center, which means probably female things like, going in to check if you have cervical cancer or things like that, which again, I was able to do all of those things during the COVID crisis. There wasn't a shortage of places to go to be able to do that. I know that in some states that there were people having trouble getting their cancer treated. So it may be different in different states, but I don't think those places all shut down. So I think some of those loans are probably fraud, but we don't know, and we wouldn't be able to prove it. So I wouldn't necessarily specify, this one or that one. But it was interesting because I learned about an organization in New York from seeing these loans. And I don't think it was high on the list. I don't think it's on this list. Huh?
What am I looking for?
I'm looking at the list, and I don't think it's on the list of it might be under direct payments, which there were only
let's see. I'm under direct payments. There's Feminist Women's Health Center, Little Feminist, Feminist Book Club, Airy Fairy Feminist.
I can't remember the name of it.
$1,000 for the Feminist Sticker Club, Cat Sticker
By the way,
Club.
guys,
you can't make this up, guys. Cat Sticker
By the way,
Club.
I just want to point out they're the underdogs.
Yeah, they are the underdogs.
You know what you won't see? Any freaking payments to any men's initiative.
NCFM.
Yeah,
none of us got money.
Any men's initiatives that aren't feminist. In fact, I just recently got into an altercation with our friend Michael Flood, and he pointed out that he started up a men's helpline or something, but it was feminist. And I'm like, why do men's services
not really
have
for
to be
men?
feminist? Yeah, they're not really for men then, are they? Like,
it's
why is it necessary?
Men.
Why is it necessary for services to men? Why is it necessary for a phone line taking men's calls for being abused or for being suicidal? Why does it have to have a feminist framework, guys? Why? Anyway.
Because if it doesn't have a feminist framework, then men might actually get the help they need when they're abused. And that means that their female abusers would be jailed. It would ruin the statistics that feminists use to gather money from the federal government and persuade organizations, departments, agencies, and so on to hire them to tell them how to do their jobs. and their money would dry up. If men get the help they need and women are held accountable for abusing men, then feminists run out of money because their story stops being persuasive.
Yeah. And if it isn't say it's feminist, they don't get the money. And I've seen how these feminist organizations are run. They do the minimum amount to get maximal return, and their board members do almost no work, and they get huge, well, not huge, I mean, it's piecemeal, but you find out that there are people who are board members, multiple organizations getting $40,000 a year from each one for an hour a month's work. You know, it's insane. And they probably don't even do it in the office. They just do like a Zoom session for an hour a month, 40,000 a year. And
Yeah.
I'm not even exaggerating. And this is, so it has to be feminist, because not only does it have to push the ideology, but they're the ones who have to make the money. Okay, because I think ultimately that's what it's about. But let's keep going.
Yeah. So we were just looking at that, but well, let's get into the meat of this, because it's already been like almost half hour since we went live. And so what you found was on the US spending, all of the various like state funded feminist curriculums and shit like that. Where do you want me to start? I have Department of State, United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. I don't know if that's like a recipient or
2 weeks ago, we went through PACT Incorporated already. See, the Regents of the University of Minnesota, I believe that was a research grant. Taller Salud was one I don't think that we went through. So that one we might want to look at. I don't think we looked at that one.
Okay, where is...
That's the third one down on the list you have open right now, unless that's an image.
Okay. Yeah, Taller Salud Incorporated.
So if you click on the number, right click on the number and open it in a new tab, and then look at that tab and see what it has.
It's loading right now.
Yeah, it takes a minute.
Yeah,
it's
takes
really
a second,
slow.
But...
And after people started looking at it, it got all glitchy because, well, I guess we figured out what it takes to DDoS the U.S. government. Everybody was looking into this once those actually exposed it. But I'm going to go back to the page.
Taller Salud Incorporated, total awarded amount $214,285.
Now, if you scroll down slightly here,
like right,
it should a little more.
Like right
there,
here.
It'll come up. Keep going. You're looking for. It'll say something about the purpose. Maybe it's back up at the top and it just hadn't loaded, because it doesn't load evenly. It's very weird.
Oh yeah. I'm trying to see here. So, well, here's business types.
No, you'll want to go down below that. It's below the graph, I'm sure.
I see the awarding agencies, countries, USA. Yeah. That's all it says.
There's more that comes up on the page. Is there something to the right on the page that's not showing?
I don't see like an ability to scroll to the right.
Okay,
but
so
it does say woman-owned business right here.
Yeah, but that's not why they got that money.
All right, let's try this another way. I'm gonna see if I can. We're gonna reload it and see if it shows more this time. So let's just give that a moment. But let's see. I'm looking at the chat. Remember, send us a super chat if you want to like add anything to the conversation. We will definitely we will read it. feedthebadger.com/just-the-tip. Okay, so description: Taller Salud is a feminist, culturally specific nonprofit organization founded in 1979 with a 42-year trajectory of violence prevention and health promotion community work.
Yeah, this one, we did talk about this one. This one is the Puerto Rican thing. They paid to teach the police in Puerto Rico. If I remember right, it was the cops in Puerto Rico to basically teach that violence is a gendered thing. And when I read this, it's hard not to yell it because it's all in caps, and I'm a Gen Xer, and
yeah,
but
I feel like it's shouting at us. Like,
yeah, large print addition on or addition on my screen. The
I
program
want
will
me to
serve a
read it?
minimum. So that what they're doing here is, let's see,
I could read it.
implementing the island's only community violence intervention program, Acuerdo de Paz, which is peace accords. Peace Accords uses highly trained violence interrupters and street outreach workers. So what they are doing is they are training young men in the community to confront people who are violent. And they specifically picked men, right? Public education campaigns such as those addressing structural racism and toxic masculinities, there it is, behavioral and funding. The program will serve a minimum of 40 young males, ages 15 to 30. So they may have kids as young as 15 years old doing this. Residents of the region every year with violence, violence interruption,
40?
conflict mediation, behavior, education, employment, and community outreach activities, which could be anything from hosting, sports activities to walking up to people who are engaged in a fight and trying to stop the fight, to having community meetings and trying to lecture people about it. And it's from a gendered perspective.
$2 million for 40 men and boys. That's as much as we can talk about how it's ideologically problematic, because, well, first of all, there's places where the cops are basically telling feminist informed domestic violence people to just turn around and go away because you're making things worse. But so when feminists say that they're not reducing violence, they're harvesting it. But the other thing is that this sounds like it's so minimal impact, like 40 men and boys, $2 million to teach 40 men and boys and do like picnics and sports thing. $2 million. That's like, ultimately, what is that even going to do if all they're doing is talking to 40 men? A minimum. They say minimum, but that just means that that's probably where they're at. They're probably doing like 39.
Well, the really strange part of this is, all right, they have in Puerto Rico, they have their own police forces, right? There are churches there, right? There are community leaders already in these places, but they are going to take young men who have no expertise whatsoever, who they're going to pull them out of schools, going to pull them out of their jobs, whatever, and they're going to give them training in conflict management, and they're going to teach them to look at conflict between men or between men and women through a feminist lens that considers the causes of violence to be toxic masculinity. And then they are going to fund those men's activities, whether, like I said, it's from anything from hosting a sports activity like a basketball game or a football game or a soccer match or whatever, regularly at a local park where they interact with young men and everything, to lecturing people in a community event, to going up to people in the street and saying, stop fighting. And if they're teaching young men to teach other young men that the causes of their violence are things like feeling like it makes them more manly, when they're confronting men in gang neighborhoods, they're confronting gang activity, right? Because it does specify that here as well, and it specifies knowledge of crime trends and gang related activities is one of the things that they're training them in, because that's going to be necessary. Gang members don't engage in violence because they think it makes them feel manly. All right. Gang members engage in violence because somebody's trying to kill them, or because they want something and they don't want to pay for it, or because they want to sell drugs in a neighborhood and they don't want somebody to compete with them, and they don't want the cops to catch them, and they don't want people to tell on them. And they want some people to sell their drugs for them that don't want to sell their drugs for them. They engage in violence for those reasons. It's completely mercenary. It has nothing to do with whether it makes them feel like men or not. And a lot of the gang members that do it are women. Right? A lot of heads of gangs are women. And so what kind of toxic masculinity are they suffering from?
Well, they're under the thrall of the men that they
They're
have
operating
control over.
under
they're underlings.
patriarchy. So no,
Yeah.
they're still under patriarchy. See, so yeah.
But
All
it's
right.
just obnoxious rhetoric. I wanted
It
to point
is.
something out though. This is not $2 million a year, I believe.
No, it's $2 million over 3 years.
over 3 years. So that's, it's a little bit less. It's almost 650,000 a year, 100,000 a year. That's not too bad, is it? To do some skills work, building sessions with 40 men.
But it's not even all of Puerto Rico. It's
No.
the community at the community level, seeking crime reduction, improving criminal justice responses to crimes, and denormalizing crime in the community of Loríza and the northeastern region of Puerto Rico.
But this is continual, guys. Like, you'll see these initiatives, like, again, skill sessions for 40 men and boys. Yes, part of the problem is they're doing things like teaching them to intervene with gang violence, which will get them killed. But the other problem is, why does that cost $650,000 a year? Like,
Puerto Rico is smaller than Connecticut.
how much could they possibly be
It's
doing?
tiny.
Yeah, like, and like doing some workshops, some skill building. I actually looked at a lot of the financials for these feminist NGOs. And if Honey Badger Radio was operated as a feminist NGO, we would probably have a budget of $5 to $6.5 million a year. 95% of which would go to board members or not 95, but a good portion of it would go to board members, each taking about $40,000 in terms of salary a year for a 1 hour Zoom call a month. So we'd probably have like 16, 20 board members doing that. And it'd just be like, it's unbelievable. And then there'd be like 5% towards creating any kind of content, doing any kind of investigation work, doing any kind of research, anything else, like just 5% towards that. It would be, I can't even imagine operating like that. Can you imagine it? Like, every one of you, like, each one of you would probably be making like 160,000 a year. Because you're directly involved in the production of the. I'm sorry, I'm probably making people feel bad, but and we'd all be. And this is why they do it. This is why they use this ideology, because it's a gigantic meal ticket. Anyway, I'll move away from that because it's depressing.
No, it is, but I mean, but now we see it's also very fake. Like, it's obviously all like, astroturfed, most of this stuff. So that's kind of a good sign, in my opinion. But what's another thing we could
says in the vertical chat? What about violent women? Does this organization address that? Do you mean our organization? Yeah, 100%.
No.
Their
Anthony
organization?
Huber,
No.
he's talking about them. Anthony Huber, permanently retired skateboarder, has been watching us for a while, so he knows what we're about.
Yeah. Oh, okay. All right.
So what's another organization we can look at now, or do you want to go on to something else, Hannah?
Well, I've been on the per capita spending there, because when you think about it, all right, just looking at numbers for size comparisons, population of Puerto Rico is about 3.2 million. There are over 1.1 million Puerto Ricans living in the New York metropolitan area. So New York City has a third as many Puerto Ricans as Puerto Rico does. And we are exporting toxic masculinity to Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
And we're spending $2 million.
Puerto Rico's population is the same as Chicago's population. Chicago's population is 3 million. So
I have a feeling that the men of Puerto Rico are going to call bullshit on this anyway.
Yeah, maybe. I would hope so. I think that Puerto Ricans are pretty old school, let's put it that way. They're not much different from southern hillbilly types. They just speak Spanish. That's why we call them jibaros, because that just means hillbilly in Spanish. And Puerto Rico, the island, is a lot of hills and rainforests and stuff. My family's from the south central part of Puerto Rico, so not where this is going on. That's like the northeastern tip near San Juan, which is the capital. So definitely more urban over there. But yeah,
I just have the feeling like if you took this to the Hatfields and McCoys, for instance, which that was kind of similar to gang violence, except it for silly reasons in the beginning. But they killed each other for decades after the initial killing in revenge. All the killings were revenge killings, and it didn't have anything to do with it makes me a man if I do this. It was these other people did us wrong, and we have to do something about it. And this is our territory, and that's their territory. And if they come here, then we're going to kill them. And if we go there, we're going there to get revenge because they did something wrong to us. And both sides were like that. But if somebody came along and said, "Now you men," started in with the whole, this doesn't make you manly, and being violent doesn't make you tough and strong. Like they'd have been shot. That they wouldn't have gotten the full lecture out. They'd have gotten 3 or 4 sentences out, and they'd have been shot.
Mm-hmm.
All we can hope for is that these initiatives are as pointless, basically just exercises in creating money streams rather than. We can only hope they're just so incompetent they haven't talked to a single Puerto Rican kid.
Yeah.
Well, Puerto Rican kids are pretty modern.
On the other hand,
they have a modern sensibilities. And I'm sorry, go ahead.
But if you're an American, that's probably not the best outcome because you paid $650,000 a year for these people to screw around, making things more dangerous for Puerto Rican boys, potentially getting people killed. And the only hope is that they didn't actually do anything. This was just an accountancy fiction. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, now some of these organizations, you can actually scroll down on their page and it will tell you what they paid their executives. But I noticed that a lot of them, that's left blank. It doesn't say what they got paid, which is interesting.
Don't look at the executives. Look at the board members.
Well, they don't have that listed.
No, because they don't have to. If board members make under something like $50,000 a year, I probably since I looked in 2022, if they make under a certain amount, they don't have to declare it to the regulatory agency. So they keep. So what happens is they're on the board of Feminist NGO A, they're on the board of Feminist NGO B, C, D, E, F, however many, each getting $40,000 from that NGO, which they don't have to declare for an hour's work, a Zoom meeting a month. And then they just collect a whole bunch of them, and suddenly you're making $250,000 a year for fucking nothing. And that's how and they don't declare that stuff. Like they might have an executive officer, one executive officer, a couple executive officer doing a little bit of office work. For example, the one I looked at, I think, was the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence in the U.S. And what she does is she has a pamphlet, she has a mailing list, she arranges for a workshop once a month, and she makes referrals to plastic surgeons. And she makes $160,000 a month, a year, $160,000 American a year between perks and her actual salary. I mean, I'm like looking at that. I'm like, how much time would that actually take? Like maybe 5 hours a week.
Mm-hmm.
And she probably has an assistant who does the actual work. And it's like a lot of them are operated just like that. The money just goes to them. And her salary is considered expenses because she's directly related to the production of that workshop. Even though probably the only thing she does is maybe make a phone call and then go for a coffee to arrange it. And then that's it.
Yeah. And there's a bunch of that. And then, we lost Brian.
We lost Brian.
Yeah.
Just jump back in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a thing I sent you on Discord directly that you should open if you can.
Yeah, hold on a second. Just
It's the link that's right below our thing
yeah,
here.
I'm just gonna share this. Okay. So what's the link? Where is it? Where'd
It's
you
right
put it?
below the studio link that you sent me. So it's the very last thing on in your.
Yeah, I see it. I got it. Let me just open it up. Yeah, for some reason, Video Ninja like ate itself for a second, but I'm back, so we're good.
There we go. That's good.
All right, so it's opening up now. Let me just share this tab. International Agency for International Development, USAID.
So this is USAID. This one you
Yes.
might find interesting specifically, and our listeners that are from the East will find this interesting specifically as well. The purpose of the proposed activity is to conduct feminist-informed, formative research on integrated GBV-SRH. So what that is gender-based violence dash SR is something like sexually related something, but they now are calling it gender-based. They've stopped calling it domestic. They've stopped calling it intimate partner violence. It is now gender-based violence.
Rebranding.
Oh, no, it's not even. That is absolutely evil.
Right now.
Yeah, but it also proves what I've been trying to I've been in these arguments. Sorry, Hannah. I've been in these arguments with Twitter.
The location that they're doing this is Bangladesh. But go on.
Yeah, but they're probably testing it out on the specimens. You know, those cultures that are lesser. So
but they've been doing it to us forever. Now they're just exporting it, and they're just saying, well, let's call it something else because men's issues advocacy in places like Bangladesh, I think, are more mainstream. Isn't that in India? Am I wrong about that?
I'd have to look into it. But my overall point is that I've been arguing with people that said that about how feminists use domestic violence and sexual assault to push their idea that men use these things to oppress women in patriarchy. And people push back on that, and I show them receipts, but this is a huge receipt. They're literally calling domestic violence gender-based violence. Like how much more of an evidence that's what they're pushing this narrative. And then, again, if we don't address this stuff, we are just going to continuously have this cropping up over and over and over again, because this is the root of the problem. People are looking at the LGBTQ plus LRNN, LMNOP crap, right? And they're saying, well, that's not it. That's a symptom. And it's growing out of the root, which is this.
Yep.
Which is destruction of the relationship between men and women, and this insistence that we deny biology in order to maintain this idea of men's oppression, that historically men oppressed women. So women's position wasn't a result of biology, but of men oppressing women. You see, women would be seafarers if they hadn't been oppressed, but they'd be able to tie those knots in a squall. Nobody haul up, 300 pounds. Nobody's business, right? They'd be able to do anything a man could do if men hadn't oppressed them. What does that sound like?
Men totally stopped me from buying and using this book. I don't have it in my hands right now because patriarchy. We didn't arrange that, by the way.
Yeah, but my point is that
I just thought it was an interesting book.
Women were not oppressed throughout history. They were incapable of the jobs that were available outside of the home. And the jobs in the home were nothing to sneeze at either, because they were of critical importance to the maintenance of society. And yet we frame all of that in terms of biology. Women were restricted by their biology. We frame it in terms of oppression. Men oppressed women because it's a useful narrative to make money. Let's put it down to brass tacks. That's what it comes down to. You spout that off and people give you money, right? But it is a lie. And it is a lie that is upstream of all of the crap we're seeing with the rainbow or the LGBTQ plus. It's downstream of that. That stuff is downstream of it. Okay.
Yep. So there's more. There's more. All right. So we see this. The purpose of the proposed activity is to conduct feminist informed. So it's being funded by the government. It specifically says feminist informed formative research on integrated GBV SRH approaches using a qualitative human-centered design over 18 months in order to inform best or promising practices for GBV SRH integration by practitioners in humanitarian contexts. So what that means is they're using this research, this feminist-informed research, then to inform the creation of law and policy in how aid is being distributed in other countries. So the reason it's significant that this is in Bangladesh is that there's a policy in India with organizations like USAID that distribute food to people who are living in abject poverty situations, that the head female of the household is the only one who is allowed to go get the food. So if she is abusing the men in her family, they will starve. They do not have any recourse. They cannot go get the food on their own, and they can't appeal to anyone to give it to them. She is in control, so they have to obey her. And this design is literally intended to force men to depend on women in ways that will cause them physical harm if they don't obey, right? That's one thing this organization is doing. If you click on the name where it says recipient, and the name is International Rescue Committee, which I find ironic given that information, and you right click on that and open it, or if you click on it and just go from this page, because I think we've got everything we need from this page.
Yeah,
International Rescue. Click on International
let's
Rescue Committee. All right.
Let's do it.
You will see this is not the only thing they've been funded. It's going to take a minute here to load, but wait till this number pops up, because it's not 600,000. That was one thing.
Woo! $500 million almost, huh?
Yeah.
Total awarded $471.4 million from 213 transactions.
Yep. And so I Googled them, and I found their website, and I started looking at their website. I have sent you a link on Discord, Brian.
Got it.
And I found this.
Where we focus, women and girls. Yep. Particularly in places affected by crisis, face discrimination, violence, and a lack of equal opportunities that threaten their lives and rob them of their potential. But with the right support and investment, they can change their own future and uplift entire communities. They can change the world. This reminds me of like when, of course, but that's just the impetus to essentially like bring in these external, apparatuses like NGOs, which are supposed to help, but they actually usually do more damage than anything else. So where else do you want me to go from there?
So what I found here, and I hadn't gone too far into this, but a lot of it, they do things like they'll fund medical centers that are female specific. So only women can go there, and it's for specifically female problems. Or they'll do like they're doing in India, where they're handing out food, or they're handing out vouchers for food, or the equivalent of food stamps, but only women can get them. But if you click on let me go back to the page. If you click on see our work in action, so you scroll down to the first thing, our goals, and it has these 3 goals. The first one is
women and girls see real improvements to their safety, health, education, economic well-being, and their ability to make decisions that affect their lives. How we get there: women's rights are human rights. The IRC is working to break down barriers for women and girls and ensure gender equality is a cornerstone of all of our programs. Wow, that sounds oddly familiar. It sounds. You want me to go to number 2, or do the see our work in action?
You think about this, all right. So in a country like the United States, where we've had a history of women stepping into roles that may have been that started out as traditionally male roles, such as during the Industrial Revolution, men's manufacturing activities and women's manufacturing activities were pretty segregated, right? Men built things where running the machines took a lot more muscle and was a lot more, the risks were different. Women ran machines where it took a lot more agility. So you saw more women in textiles. Like my great aunts worked in a textile factory. But so they both went into manufacturing. But in areas where there was, extreme heat, and I don't mean like the kind of hot heat that you get in a laundry press. I mean the kind of heat where you're melting aluminum and steel, like that kind of heat, which is entirely different if you haven't experienced it. Um, those were men. Men did that, not women. And of course, when the United States got involved in wars and started sending men, overseas, pulling them out of the factories, then they needed the women to step in. So you had this change that took place, and you had laws that changed sort of behind the cultural changes that were taking place, but it was organic, not something that another country didn't come in and say, we don't like your culture and we're coming in here to change it, right? So what these people do is they go into countries where that's not the culture, and that's not how their industrial revolution happened, and it's not how their culture responded when there were wars or famine or other outbreak. Women have been protected from a lot of dangers. Men are the ones that took those risks. And now that safety measures are more common in those workplaces, they're saying, well, you have to let women in now. And you have to let women be out of their homes and go and do things that are not specifically for their families and earn money and so on. In countries where, like, if I earn a living in the United States, all right, and I'm living separately from my husband or something, and I just buy a bunch of stuff for myself and my kids are starving, I can be convicted of child neglect. Even if my husband and I are living together and we're married and we both are trying to contribute to the household, and I live in luxury and the rest of the family is starving, I still can be convicted of child neglect because we've had that evolution of culture here in the United States. If a woman in, say, a Middle Eastern country earns a bunch of money and her family isn't making that money, she just keeps it. Can she be convicted of child neglect for not spending that money on her children? Because from what I understand, only the men are considered responsible for that. Only the men can be convicted. And in fact, if she earns that money and he doesn't pay her taxes, he can be convicted. So these women, this isn't all women, but this organization is going into countries where women may not be accountable if they earn a bunch of money and then don't spend any of it on their families. And they may not be accountable if they go places and do things and it happens to be illegal. They may be able to get their husbands in trouble without intending it. They may cause all kinds of problems for their families, and they are disrupting the culture there and simply imposing their ideas. So that's when they say we stand with women and girls, what they're actually saying is we have an idea of how women and girls should live, and we are going into other countries and imposing those ideas on those other countries. It's not that women and girls in those other countries have begged them to come in and change everything. It's that they are coming in and selling it to them. And then they pretend that the men of those countries are at fault when there are problems from the cultural changes that are taking place. When what they have brought in doesn't mesh with everything else that's already there. So if that makes sense. So if you click on Stand with Women and Girls, it goes right back to the top of the page. It doesn't actually go to any initiatives or anything.
If I go to see our work in action, it just goes to the top of the page.
Well, Stand with that was if you clicked on Stand with Women and Girls, but yeah. Breaking down barriers here, they're talking about that there are things that could change, like women not being able to go see doctors and so on, but they're not going in and they're not going in and talking to people and working with legislators to try to get things changed and everything. They're going in and shaming people and suing and building things that only women can access and so on.
Yeah.
So
Well, I don't. I think that because there's like so much more that we have to go through.
yeah,
But ultimately, what we're looking at is they're exporting, um, feminism, and
to these countries,
that,
right?
and and they're painting a really nice picture. Like there's so much propaganda. It really annoys me to see like these little
Yeah,
girls playing tug of
playing tug
war.
of war. That
Yeah,
looks really
but
cute. And this
it
story
does,
that,
but
that's on the next
it's
page it
super
sounds really
insidious.
compelling too, right?
Yeah.
The
No,
story,
I know.
except when you read the first paragraph, meet 14-year-old Mariama. She's been forced to flee her home in the Central African Republic because armed forces are threatening her village. And then it goes on and it talks about her hardships, and they're real hardships, but
This is
they're talking
emotional
about this.
manipulation of the highest
Yeah,
order.
they're talking about this like women in these circumstances have hardships that are unique to women, and men do not also have hardships. Men do not also face violence. Men do not also face a loss of medical care. Men do not also face an inability to find
Go
a
back
safe
to that
place to
photo.
bathe.
To
The
the one
top
above.
one?
Yeah, this one right here. You're right on it. You notice how the girls are in the front and the boys are in the back?
Yep.
Isn't that say a picture is worth 1,000 words, isn't it?
Let's say I'm so they're exporting essentially like feminism in the, let's say, the gift wrap of liberalism to other countries, and the purpose of that, and I think the consequence of that, is going to be creating instability and instilling
Oh
in
yeah.
girls and women and the men who support them, which is going to be a lot of men because men generally support women, a revolutionary attitude, and it's actually going to destabilize those countries. Just like anytime we get involved with some third world country, we make things worse. Like any like large Western liberal democracy that goes into another country and says, "Oh, you guys are having trouble growing rice. Well, we're going to send you shit tons of rice." And so instead of like, what is the saying? Like, give a man a fish, he eats for a day, and so what they do is they make it worse. I've seen documentaries about it. And another thing too is that most NGOs are not non-government NGOs. Like it's a lie. Like they actually get money from three-letter agencies and various other. So they're not even non-government. They just say they're non-government. It's like, so in the best way to destabilize a country, and I think the most effective way to do it, is to turn the men and the women against each other, because not in every you can't necessarily do it in other ways, like let's say creating like an LGBT class, or doing it along lines of race, because a lot of the countries are homogenous and they all have the same religion or whatever, and their culture is very like it's all the same, but every country has men and women. So this is like where you do it. And the first thing you do is you look at a country and you say the women there are not served and they're not liberal enough, and we're going to make them more liberal. And that sounds good. And everybody's like, oh yeah, why not? But it doesn't do that at all. It just makes the women fear and resent the men. And then the purpose of that is obviously to make the men overreact. And it just destabilizes and it creates, like conflict. So
yeah, so where they've done that, how they've done that, you'll have to click on, let's see, you are at that page. All right.
Is it on this page?
Yeah, you'll want to go down.
What is the
what
IRC,
is the IRC doing differently?
Yeah, at the
See where it
IRC,
says preventing violence against women and girls.
So
And if you
I'll read
click on
this
that,
and then I'll click on that.
click on that. Okay.
Okay.
And it takes you to where we focus safety, and then it goes down to their goals. And the first goal, ensure that people are safe in their homes and receive support, blah, blah, blah. Supporting women and girls and having healthy and safe relationships, and working with men to change violent behavior and stop intimate partner violence. So they're promoting the gendered model that treats intimate partner violence as something that men do to women, not something that happens among both sexes.
And it's cyclical almost, and it's taught
right. And
from
then
being abused.
Yeah, masculinity is conditioned, so we need to make them less masculine so that they're less violent, because masculinity is violence. That's what they believe. I'm obviously not what I believe.
And if I can go back and find it somewhere on this page, it might be the previous page. It says they've been doing this since 1996. Yep. So on the page that you go click your back button where it says, what is the IRC doing differently? Now that you've seen that they promote a specific gender model of what domestic violence is. Then you see at the IRC, every time I read this, I'm thinking of IRC chats. I'm sorry, guys. That's why I keep smiling. I'm like, in the IRC chat, we discuss, we help people whose lives and livelihoods are shattered by conflict and disaster to survive. So they're going to war-torn areas. They're going to areas that have had famine, floods,
already
natural
unstable.
disasters, unstable. Yeah. We prioritize help for the most vulnerable. And in 1996, we were the first humanitarian aid group to develop an international aid team dedicated to preventing violence against women and girls. So they have, since 1996, with government funding from the U.S. government, been imposing this gendered model of responding to intimate partner violence, intimate partner and sexual violence in all over the world, actually, in areas that are torn by natural disasters and war. So these people are probably operating in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where, yes, during wartime, sometimes women get raped. Men get raped to death. Right? Women get attacked by the equivalent of criminals in the United States. Men get attacked by the equivalent of, what were they called?
Alison, stop
Firefly
taking the bait.
fans will know what I'm talking about. Reavers. They were called Reavers. But these aliens that, or they weren't really aliens, if I remember right, but they had completely lost their minds. And the statement was that they would beat you to death, they would rape you to death, and they would eat you, and hopefully in that order.
Oh yeah, for sure,
alive.
for sure. Yeah,
but in any case,
but it's other men, so that makes it okay. So
well, yeah, and
I mean, it's not necessarily other men, but it usually is. But
there were parts of Africa a while back that had a massive problem of female rape gangs going around because they wanted to have babies and they couldn't find men that wanted to have babies with them. So it's not exactly unknown that it's not a gendered crime, right? But yeah, this they've been doing this since 1996. 1996 was before my son was born. Right? I graduated high school in 1991.
Yeah, it's like almost 20 years ago.
Yeah,
it's
it's
more than 20 years ago, almost 30 years ago.
Yeah, it's almost 30 years ago.
It's like 29 years ago. Yeah, 29.
Yeah.
So
yeah, anybody that was born that year is having an age-related crisis because they're hitting the 30-something next year. And this program has spent that many years. And I want you to go back to the page with the USAID spending.
The USAID spending. Let me see. Is this the right page? Yeah, it is. Okay.
Okay, can I point something out? Because I got into a brief argument with somebody in the vertical chat. This is discrimination against minority men around the world.
Yeah.
I mean, they're trying to say, oh, well, we're helping the women, blah, blah, blah. But this is literally, they're making the lives of poor Black and brown men worse around the world. They're removing their roles in their families and communities and replacing them with, I would honestly say predatorial, exploitative, colonialist policies. But literally, they are harming boys and men of ethnicities and cultures that they consider to be lesser because of this framework. And I mean, I could actually, it would be fun to do this.
It's the liberal world order. That's kind of like how it's framed, because it's like
but the liberal world order will result in worse outcomes for minority men.
Yes, it will. But what I'm saying is because it is built on the framework that liberalism knows what's best for everybody, so it's going to export it everywhere, and baked into that is feminism. So that like there's no escaping it. And it is, just as you said, there's an idea that those people are inferior. I remember you and I were on WIC TV, Alison. I don't know if you remember WIC TV. He invited us on for a debate, and we were talking about the population collapse or whatever, the impending population collapse. And we were talking about like, Islamic men and women, so people from Islamic countries, and the people who were, most of them were just libs too in the conversation, they immediately were like, well, those people are inferior. And I was like, what? Like, but they're human beings still. And so like, we can't even have a conversation about right and wrong if you don't see them as agents of their own destiny doing things in the world. And so, I'm just pointing out that this is the outcome of the liberal world order seeing itself as the arbiter of morality spreading everywhere, and baked into that as part of the recipe, of the cake is feminism, which is inherently misandrist.
Okay, and to add to that, I would say this. I think somebody pointed out that there's usually more at foot, and I think there is. First of all, they're doing what all colonialists do throughout all of human history. They are destroying the ability to fight back, to innovate, to present themselves as a threat of the military and age men of a culture. This is right out of a colonialist playbook. Destroy the men, and the culture becomes less of a threat. You basically punch its teeth out. But here's the other thing. If they destabilize these economies, if they tear apart the relationship between men and women in these communities, and thus reduce their productivity, which means that they're less effective, less resilient, they're more reliant on USAID, they can then harvest these people as resources for our economies. If we look at this in terms of right now, in a situation of population collapse, one of the most important resources on the planet is now people. Because people keep your economy afloat. People keep the engine running. They're doing this, creating this social chaos, allows them to harvest people from these communities. And I'm not saying that this is necessarily good for the native people but this isn't about what's good for people who already exist in a country. It's what's good for these colonialist powers. And it allows them, because in order to succeed, anybody who's innovative, usually it's men who are innovative, who want to build something, have to move out of their native country and go and immigrate to another country to do so. Right? So they are taking all of that away from the people of that country, ensuring their impoverishment, ensuring their continuous reliance, and ensuring whatever is good that rises to the top in these cultures goes to the colonialist countries. I know that people might be upset with what I'm saying, but I think that I don't think it's good for anybody. I don't think that this drain from these countries is good for them either, because they don't keep the people who are productive where they can do good for their own communities and cultures.
Yes, most people are against that in those countries. Like I've interviewed Indians and Indonesians and Filipino guys that are in tech, and they want to build their own industries in their home countries and not get exported to like the United States. So yeah, I think that the best thing we can do is get the fuck out of the way. That's what I think. I mean, some people might say, well, that's not nuanced enough. We've been throwing money in the trash for decades. Yeah. And it's our money. You can't
this is worse
take money
than that.
from me by force and then give it to some other country. And when I have an issue with it, you're like, dude, that's not enough nuance though. Fuck you, dude. It's my money.
This is worse than throwing money in the trash, right?
Yeah, it's worse than that.
This is taking your money and ironing it so that it's really razor's edge straight, and then taking a shitload of it to another country and giving them death by 1,000 paper cuts. Okay. Mm-hmm. And that's not the page I was thinking of. Go back to the page that had the recipient profile for International Rescue Committee.
Is that like
it'll if you hover over the tab, it'll come up International Rescue Committee Incorporated Federal Award.
Is it in this page that we're looking at?
No, that's a different page
on the list.
It's back on the list.
Okay, so I'll just put this list up. Okay, so which one is it called again?
International Rescue. Did you close your other tabs?
No.
Okay, it should still be in one of those tabs.
Okay, this one right here.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's okay. Now, if you scroll down, there's a graph that shows like how it goes all the way to 2008 and how the spending pattern was, and right below that, and right below that, it gives the top 5 awarding
agencies.
Yes.
Department of State.
So what we saw there was USAID before.
Yeah.
The Department of State is actually the biggest. The State Department gave them 50% of the funding that they've had over, and then USAID, which is the Agency for International Development. So when they say USAID,
we know
like
people in the chat are spurging out about us saying USAID instead of USAID. We are completely 100% aware that USAID is itself a psyop as a term, and that it actually doesn't mean aid. We are aware of that, but it's just easier for us to just say USAID.
We should start putting an S at the end of it. USAIDs. Everybody in the world's got USAIDs.
There you go. We all have USAIDs. AIDS.
And then we have the Department of Health and Human Services. All right. So the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services was ostensibly created to help people in America with poverty situations and other social services needs. Right. It runs Medicaid. It runs Medicare. I think it runs Medicare. It runs the welfare department. It runs child protective services. Actually, family services in general. It is supposed to be about managing the social systems created to serve the needs of actual citizens of the United States. And they sent 91.3 million to this international rescue committee to export feminist ideology to other countries through various programs that limit assistance to only women, or work with local governments and organizations to change policy so that their assistance benefits only women.
This is what we were fucking up against this entire time. This is what we were fucking up against, folks. And I remember all of the people who came at us and said, "What are you doing, really? We're surviving." Like this is like do you see the amount of fucking slush flowing through this? Oh man, it's insane. We were up against a behemoth that we was so ensconced in the actual like the establishment that you couldn't even see it. All you could see is its toes. This is unbelievable. I just can't believe, like, looking back, I remember how bad I felt about, it's really hard to get this stuff started, and it's really hard to keep going forward, all this shit that we're doing, and I feel bad about how much progress we've made. And then it's this. Look at how much we've been up against all this time. We haven't been fighting a lizard. We've been fighting like a 300-ton dragon. Hydra.
Yeah. And in fact, if you don't say that your organization is feminist and that you're going at it from a feminist perspective or through a feminist lens, do you think they'd give you money to start a domestic violence victims advocacy shelter where, you have people who are victims of domestic violence can stay there with their families and you get an advocate to go to court with you? Not when
literally the U.S. government is exporting feminism throughout the world. Not when the entire edifice, the entire structure, the entire institution is feminist. No, you're not going to get that.
Yeah, if I wanted to start a 501c3, I think is what they're called, and build a shelter or buy a building and create a men's shelter in Dayton, Ohio, which at one point I was hoping to be able to someday do. If I wanted to do that, I would literally have to put down how we're doing it through a feminist lens, how we're doing it with a feminist perspective, what feminist organizations will endorse me, and how I am going to use feminist ideology to cure those men of their objections to being battered by their wives.
Yeah. And this is tearing the mask off. And all along, what feminists were calling the patriarchy was them.
This is probably also the same in Canada. In fact, we know it's the same in Canada because this is the kind of thing that Cafe came up against, right? This is why Earl Silverman killed himself.
Yes.
This is what killed Earl Silverman.
Mm-hmm.
This is the rope.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Can I just, I wanted to digress a little bit. There's someone in the vertical chat named Outlaw Josie Wales who says he's a federal marshal. And that well, I don't know. Maybe he's telling the truth about the marshal part. It's a cool name, I know. So, hey, Outlaw Josie Wales, if you want to, and you're serious about being a marshal, I would like to have you on our show as a guest so we can talk about what's going on, because you said that you see the spending yourself and the waste. So I'm curious about that. I don't know if you'd be interested. Maybe you're camera shy, but let me know what you think. And if you want to, seriously consider being a guest on our show, then send us an email. Allison, what's the email address? Or join our Discord server at badgernation.online.
Yeah, if you really are a federal marshal, I would love to have you on HBR Talk just to talk about the gender-based violence training that you get.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know that that's something that I've been talking about for a long time. That it's funded by the Violence Against Women Act, but there's other funding. There were grants. Every president has made grants for this. And so I'd be interested in talking about that specifically, because again, we know the statistics and we know the reality, and then we know the government is telling people who actually work in law enforcement to treat female violence like it's men's fault or like it's not that bad and doesn't exist. So yeah, definitely something that I would like to see.
And Fiakmar, if you want to come on our stream and throw spaghetti into the chat, into a conversation, you also can call us. We'll talk to whoever. So.
I think it'd probably be hilarious because he'll come on stream and he'll be in a suit with an earpiece and be like,
Fiakmar, yeah, right, yeah, like some Men in Black glasses and shit. Anyway, so. Okay, so anyway, we're looking at agency. You were talking about the Department of Health and Human Services. So
the Department of Health. And you see, below that, it's not as much. 1.79%.
For Department of Commerce and Department of
Agriculture. Right now, when on my pay or on mine, when it came up, let me see where I was here. Yeah, it has. It's lower. Okay, I see what it is. It's the 0.37% from the Department of Agriculture.
Yeah.
That does not mean that these are the only agencies that money is coming from, and means that smaller percentages just aren't showing up on this list, because it does say the top 5. To see more than the top 5, you can visit our advanced search page, which we don't need to do. But every organization that I've looked at like this, from PACT to this one, there's been several. They've all had this where they're not just getting money from USAID. They're getting money from these other departments and agencies. They're funding things like, well, we're going to Timbuktu and we're training the local police forces in Timbuktu that when domestic violence is two-way, that if somebody's more injured than the other person, they must have been the primary aggressor, which isn't necessarily always true. Women actually often hurt themselves trying to engage in violence. And I think my favorite story about that was from one of the sources that I used in that video that I was talking about earlier, where a woman in California broke her wrist trying to stab her husband because he put his arm up and she brought her wrist down on his wrist, And there's a thing about
Oh
biology.
my God.
Men's bones are thicker and heavier than women's bones. So if you bring your bones down on a man's bones with a lot of force and one of those bones breaks, it's going to be yours if you're female. That's common sense, right? But under primary aggressor policies, guess who gets arrested? Even though you were trying to kill him and you hurt yourself trying to kill him because you're injured and he's bigger and stronger, it looks like he did something to you and the cops will haul him off in cuffs. Even if you both tell the same story, because the primary aggressor policy says he gets hauled off in cuffs. So when you get something like that, where some of these are funded by the Department of Justice, that's where I got that particular type of, we're going to go train police forces. They do that. They go to countries all over the world, and it's not always third world countries. There's an initiative that this country had in Italy that actually was similar to that, and it's on. It doesn't have quite a bit of description. The description is a bunch of letters and numbers, so it went to Italy and it went to Afghanistan. So they're training Afghanistani police to view domestic violence as something men do to women. So of course, then when you see domestic violence statistics come out of Afghanistan, what are they going to be based on? That training and how the police responded to that training. And not necessarily, right? Funded research and development. So they're actually going through, this was a DOD grant for, let's see if it says the amount, $378,502. The $2 is obviously very important. It's for the paper boy. But
can I just point something out? All right, so actually, statistics coming out of the Middle East shows high rates of female domestic violence, but nobody wants to talk about that. But
if you see that change, you know why now.
I just wanted to say that FACMOR has responded to your invitation to come on and has said, rather, I would bring 22 years of overseas development expertise and experience. No spaghetti, sorry. So you
wait, does he work for USAID?
Yeah,
company that's funded by USAID.
Not offended, but I play one on TV.
He came in and he said, what have I stumbled in on? And you just so happen to have 22 years in overseas aid.
Yeah, we totally believe that you.
No wonder you're came
here organically, dude.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, like you might have an invested interest in all of this, FACMOR.
Yeah, a little bit.
And in the narrative itself that makes you money.
I like how he's trying to, whoever this is trying to insult Americans. I remember when Americans were brave and had integrity. Okay, dude.
Yeah,
have fun with that. Still not getting our money. I don't give a shit. Like, you can say whatever you want. You're just coping at this point, not getting our money. Fuck you, find it someplace else. Go to Canada. I hear Trudeau likes giving away people's money.
Don't. That is mine.
Okay. Well,
why the hell would you do that to me?
I mean, it's okay, Alison. The Chinese have already
taken every penny.
They're taking your money, yeah. So you just have to change it. Change it. That's all I can say is change it.
It's the Beavis and Butthead approach to politics. If you think it sucks, change it.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see what happens.
You just pick up the remote.
Unfortunately,
the voting stylus
are actually making the liberals more popular, so we'll see if we're able to get rid of them. But anyway, let's keep going.
All right. So what are we looking at next?
Okay, gosh. If we go back to there's so much stuff here.
Yeah.
If we go back to
if we go to the first thing, because that was
actually if we go back to Pact Incorporated. Now we went over this kind of
Pact Incorporated. Is that on the list
PACT.
here?
It's at the very top. It's the very first thing on the list of grants for the keyword feminism.
Okay, so let's go back to this. Share this tab instead. So AI. No, wait. Is this it? This is search feminist. Yeah, when I search feminist. Keywords, grants.
Pact should be at the top there. Agency. Okay, click on grants. That's
I'm on grants.
well, you're on grants.
Unless
That's
it's
weird.
direct payments.
Nope,
Let me
it's
see.
on grants. It's on grants. That's
Oh,
unless
okay.
I'm looking in the
Well,
wrong.
just shoot me the link and I'll open it. Maybe the numbers have moved.
You
Yeah,
had
Feminist
it
Women's
open a
Health
minute ago.
Center.
That's the weird
I
part.
did.
Yeah. Let
You
me.
know what? Can I make it a
Oh,
suggestion?
Pact. Oh, you're talking about Pact. I see it.
Yeah,
it's right
Pact
here.
Incorporated.
Pact Incorporated. Okay.
Okay.
So should I go to Pact Incorporated then?
Yeah, go
Yeah,
to that
before
one.
we
Open
go
that.
through this, can I make a suggestion? We can do this again. All right.
Yeah, we
So
don't need to go through all
we
of them
don't need to go
individually.
through we can go through it all individually. I'm just suggesting that we might want to have additional shows just looking at all of this.
Believe me, I
We can go
plan
through
on
Pact
doing
is
this
what I'm saying, but
for HBR talk. I'm going to be doing this for a while. I was going to go down the warpath and start looking at the history of United States military interference in other countries and our use of men's blood as a means for laundering money. But I think we need to talk about the money first so people understand just how much is being washed and what is actually being done here. So if you look at Pact Incorporated, I'm not going to go through the whole thing of, you got the profile up. Okay, so 81.1 million. And that is, it has 15 other names if you look at there. So there are different agencies.
Up here?
Yep.
Oh.
So if you go to the top,
go
to the and it says Pact Incorporated, also known by 15 other names. So it has all these different.
Okay. So there's
and it's private agencies collaborating together. So this agency has been around for like 50 years, more than 50 years. And it has been drawing from the U.S. government for that long, since the 1970s. And we talked about this on HBR Talk. So now if you scroll down, you'll see it only shows on the chart down to back to 2008. But if you scroll down, and you'll see there'll be there we go. There you go. Go back up.
Okay. Yeah, to the chart.
Yeah. Like there were a few years there that they didn't get a whole bunch of money, and then it came back, and it started to come back again. But if you look as you go back, they got a lot more money historically, and you can sort of see in earlier years, 2008, 2009, it got a great deal of funding. And it looks like it just sort of bounces around like that. And this chart only goes back so far. But if you look at their history, it's like that. They ask for a large amount some years. They ask for small amounts some years. And then if you continue to scroll down to the awarding agencies there, and it's only going to show the top 5 again. But they actually get awards from way more agencies. Let me see if I can.
Where do you want me to click?
Go scroll down.
Okay.
There we go. It's awarding agencies there. You'll see
AID again, Department of Labor, Department of State. Yeah.
And this is another issue. All right. So you see here under awarding agencies, like it only notes a few, but then the accounts actually come from other agencies. So some of this funding, in order to actually trace where it comes from and how it's been achieved and how permeated the government is by this organization's funding and so on, you'd actually have to go to their advanced search, and you would find that this organization, similar to the one we just looked at, is getting money from a buttload of agencies. So, and they're similar also in what they do. Now, the other fun thing about this is that 81.1 million is for one iteration of Pact Incorporated. So when you click on, it says child recipient. It's a child. Does it say child recipient there too?
Where?
Okay, no, it doesn't on your page. So you might actually have the the Greater Pact Incorporated page.
So do I? If I click on a different, it won't open a new thing. No,
yeah, it won't
never
open up
mind.
anything. But I have Pact Incorporated from that page open on my page, right? This is a child recipient of what you have, and it says 118.8 million. So there's 81 million to the parent organization. Each of those organizations has that kind of money, and each of them has had huge amounts of money. And this was just for a particular set of years, or for a particular initiative, or so on. Because when I look back at 2008 for this child recipient, they have 181.8 million in 2008 from that Pact Incorporated. If you go to, let's see, I accidentally clicked on something, but it'll, if you go to any of the child recipients, each of them have different.
How do I look up the child recipients? Is there?
See.
I don't, because all I see is the main one, unless I go to maybe the list, go back to the list.
Yeah, I'm gonna see if I can get there from. Yeah,
okay.
So it should have. I'm gonna send you this link copy.
All right.
There we go. I'm gonna get to your page there. This is the parent recipient with all the child recipients, and it's showing just 30.7 million from 7 transactions, but we know that's not actually the case, because that's just one Pact Incorporated.
Right.
And you can see places where you saw holes in spending on other years in that same chart. If you scroll down, we looked at.
Oh, here it is. View child recipients. This is what I want to click on.
But you don't want to do that.
Oh, I don't. Okay.
No.
I'm sorry. All right. So
scroll back down to that chart where there were holes before. That's where all the spending is now. And if you do go through the child recipients and look at every single one of them, now this one's primarily funded by USAID. But other child recipients, which are all the same organization, by the way, they're all little branches of the same organization. They are all getting different amounts of funding. So we don't actually know, unless we were to go through and write down all the numbers from each of these and add it all up together, how much this organization is actually getting.
Yeah.
Which
so basically you take the parent organization and the child organizations, and you add them up. So Pact Inc. 30 million.
And it doesn't necessarily, this website is really not very functional.
It's a little janky.
Yeah.
So,
there are 15 of these.
And how is Pact related to feminism again? Or was it
all right? So let's go back to this page. I'm just going to put this link.
Is it this one?
Go back to this page. All right. That might be it. That might be what I'm looking for. It would be what would open if you clicked on the number at the top of the page that I just sent you. So I think it might be the right page.
Okay.
Transforming digital space. Okay, so this one's a little different.
I'm waiting for this.
Yeah, that's the correct number. That's the correct number, I think.
Is it? Okay. I'm waiting for that page you sent me to load up. So, you're talking about the Pact Inc. page.
Well, here. Yeah, that's great.
This is the link you sent me. So it's this right here.
Yep, it's that number. Okay. And it'll go right back to the page you just had open.
Yeah, that's the one that we're looking at.
Right. And if you look at this one's interesting, right? To the transform digital spaces to reflect feminist democratic principles. Right? Transform. Yeah. I want to say that more slowly, because what we've been experiencing over the last few years in terms of censorship
Can I read the whole
this is
paragraph
affected.
and then you
Yeah,
guys can
but
just talk about it?
that
it-
part people need to hear very, very
Yeah.
specifically. Transform digital spaces. Think about what that means. Transform
sure.
digital spaces, right?
Yeah.
All right, let Brian
Every
read. Let Brian
let me
read.
read it, because in the vertical people can't see this, so I want to
Okay.
make sure they can hear. I'm going to read it, because even if I displayed it, it's too small. So
You need to control the horizontal and the vertical.
yeah, so
The
the
perception.
description of this award profile for the Agency for International Development, USAID. What is the description? The transform digital spaces to reflect feminist democratic principles activity is designed to implement a global approach to addressing facilitated gender-based violence, TFGBV. This activity will look at a variety of subsets impacted by this form of violence, including towards women in politics and public life. The activity will pilot practical approaches to preventing, mitigating, and responding to TFGBV, which is technology facilitated gender-based violence. Technology facilitated
I was waiting for
gender-based
that to
violence.
sink in.
Okay. I'm just, yeah, I know. In a set of countries with diverse development contexts, including internet penetration, language, religion, regional and language diversity, and will then analyze, synthesize, and share learning from the pilot activities with a broader community of practice working to address TFGBV, technological-based gender violence. The pilot initiatives will aim to increase resourcing and capacity for programs and organizations implementing digital democracy and or TFGBV activities, and will serve to two mutually reinforcing goals. One, mitigation, prevention, and response. Two, technology facilitated gender-based violence, including towards women in politics and public life at the country level. And two, gaining practical comparative knowledge into what types of programming are effective to inform global efforts to combat this problem.
So what this means, all right? Technology facilitated gender-based violence. All right. Hello, Gamergate.
Yep.
This
no more teabagging for you guys. Sorry.
This is not even really coded language for claiming that if somebody upsets you online, if somebody says something to you online that you don't like, if you feel harassed, if you feel stalked, if you feel mistreated, right? That's violence now. That's violence is not physical anymore. Feminists have been moving the goalposts on what constitutes violence for decades. They started with the idea that yelling is violence. They started with the idea that withholding affection is violence. So not touching someone or not letting someone touch you when you want to is violence, but only if you're female, right? Not giving someone money that they want from you is violence. That's another form of domestic violence, economic violence, right? And they have this pretty much established in law and policy in a number of countries. So now they're wanting to establish that you can shut someone up online by accusing them of violence for saying something that you disapprove. And they've specified women, and they've specified women in politics, all right? So if feminist Susie Smith is running to become a leader in your country, a legislator, a judge, a prosecutor in your local area, a president, and says a bunch of things about how she's going to take fathers out of the home. Fathers are unnecessary, and we're going to make it impossible for fathers to get custody of their children because fathers having custody of their children is abuse. And you respond by posting information showing how important it is to have fathers in the home, that children raised without involved fathers are 50% more likely to have criminal outcomes, for instance. She can consider that to be gender-based violence, and it is technology facilitated, right? Under laws that this organization is promoting in various countries, your government could put you in jail for saying that. Oh, fathers are important. You can't do that. We won't vote for you if you're going to do that. Oh, okay, go directly to jail. You just said something anti-woman. Now, for those of us listening in the UK going, yes, these people operate in your country. And this is not the only thing that they're doing. This is by far not the only thing that they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Their funding is in the billions. They have been operating for longer than I've been alive. Okay. And their funding is in the billions. And they're doing things like this.
It is actually, when I see this, it is incredible that we have managed to remain on air and still talking about this stuff. And still, like, I mean, people talk. I mean, I've had so many people say, "Oh, you're so small. You don't make." But we've managed to stick with it and be a thorn in the side of a Goliath for 10 years. Well, 12 years now. I mean, that's actually, now that I think about it, that's incredible.
Yeah.
With almost nothing, like, in terms of actual resources. I mean, I really appreciate the people who do support us, but let's face it. I mean, it's been, a bit of a, it's not been, we haven't been seeing like feminist funds. And if we had, could you imagine what we would have been capable of? Like if for example, Cafe saw feminist funds. If Cafe saw feminist funds, they'd probably have solved the problem of domestic violence by now. And it's like this. I've always felt so bad for how hard it is to seem to build an audience and keep them engaged and build. And now I realize what we were up against. And the fact that we even survived this long to see what we're up against is an incredible feat of endurance. So, everybody give themselves a pat on their back. Hannah, Brian, Karen's probably not listening, but everybody who helped fund us and kept watching, like, shit, damn. Even the people who are watching us had to make an effort because of the algorithmic de-boosting. In fact, I saw it happen today, just in real time. We went from going from like 75 viewers on the vertical to now we're at 25. Must have said something that somebody didn't like. And they decided to just throttle us again.
Shut it down.
Shut it down.
Yeah, shut it down.
And yet they can't. I don't think they can do it completely because Streisand effect. They just have to try to put no energy into it, to pretend we don't exist, because if they do, then they blow us up bigger. And it's like, this is incredible. Just the sheer scope of this. We had a organization going up against our speech on the internet, against this kind of digital, like the digital communications of what this is, that was making 80 million. I saw 80 million. I saw 450 million.
Each of those was one initiative for a few years, and that's, like I said, this agency's been around for a long time.
Yep. And this is just one agency in one country.
Yep.
So,
well, and this is one agency that is centered in the United States. It's actually its main office is in DC, of course. It's a DC company, but they operate all over the world. They're global,
and they have more. Functionally, they have more power in other countries. Because the U.S. still has a constitution. So you probably wouldn't be arrested for criticizing feminism in the U.S., but it is now you would potentially in the UK, and it's going into effect potentially in Canada if the liberals manage to get their way. So no, in the U.S. you still have protections of the Constitution in terms of free speech. But in other countries where we don't have that, this USAID or USAIDs is
we can call it the USAID system, USAIDs.
USAID system, at USAID's, they're actually able to enact their will much more in these other countries where they don't have as much of a protection by law. All right. So, whew, and believe me, the rest of the world would like this to stop.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think if most Americans would like it to stop too.
Well, yeah. Why should you have to pay to make us miserable?
No. Yeah. Why? We don't want feminism here. Why would we want it anywhere else? I don't want that for other countries. So
This
yeah,
sounds like this is the worst arrangement for everyone. U.S. taxpayers have to pay to make the rest of the world miserable. For elitists in your government. Like, no, I think nobody wants this. Absolutely nobody, except people who make money off of it, of course. All right,
so
but I think we should, like, we're pushing on 2 hours here, guys.
Yeah, maybe we should.
And as much as fascinating this is, bunch of accountant documents tends to be a little bit tiring to the mind, I think. Like a bunch of figures and all of this stuff, what we're seeing, year-end reports, investigative like data, that tends to get a little bit exhausting. So I think that maybe we should revisit this. We should get Hannah. You should come back on as long as you have time, because I know that you're.
Yeah, it's kind of a challenge, but we'll have to find time for me to come back on. Or I mean, you're always welcome to hop on with us on HBR Talk too.
Yeah, it's just that when we do it this way, we're actually hitting the shorts audience too, because we got faces and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
we'll just figure out a time. But I wanted to, the one last thing I wanted to say about this, because people are kind of marveling about the time. So on their about page, our history page, it says since our founding in 1971. So they were founded in 1971, and you have to scroll down to find it. But then it on their timeline, it says with a $5,000 grant from USAID, PACT is born with a mission to help organizations serving the most disadvantaged. So they started out as an organization to direct funding to other organizations, and they do still do that. They get money from the U.S. government, and then they hand out grants to other organizations as well. And this is something else that everybody should know about. This is something you'll see in school systems. It's something that you'll see in medicine. It's something that you'll see in everything feminist ideology touches, police departments, whatever. You won't always be able to do what we did today, where you go find the organization using the word feminist, and it says what it's doing, and you read the coded language and you realize, oh, this is about gendering the idea of domestic violence, or this is about gendering the concept of food service, and so on. You'll see the first step and it looks innocuous, but they give grants to another step, or they get materials from another step, and you go to that second step and it's a little less innocuous, and it's very incomplete. And then you find that, oh, they have a lot of sources for what they're doing. So you go to their sources, and maybe the sources for their sources, and so on, till you get to something that has several layers of stuff that looks innocent in between the origin and the outcome. Yeah. And the origin actually is, the Duluth model for gender-based.
For those of you who don't know, the Duluth model is basically what I was talking about, that men use rape and domestic violence to oppress women and uphold the patriarchy. So not just that men engage in rape and domestic violence more, but they specifically use it as a social tool to organize society.
And to dominate and control women. And so it's for gender-based oppression is what they would call it. And that will be hidden behind all those layers, where you'll see terms like gender-based violence, and you'll see terms like women's rights, or female disadvantage, and all that. And they stem from that origin source. So this is pretty out front and open. But even this has those layers. So what
Mm.
we've seen is the most innocent part of it. And it was pretty nefarious.
Yeah.
That terrifies me personally, just based on the fact that the innocent part is so bad.
You know, yeah. Oh yeah, because it's discriminating against men overtly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are they doing that's hidden behind their layers?
Good.
Yeah.
Lord. Maybe they're sex trafficking boys. Who knows? I mean, that's just a possibility. I'm not saying that they do.
Right.
I mean,
But-
anything's possible. I mean, there have been a lot of AIDS scandals regarding that kind of stuff.
Right. Right.
So
So for our listeners, just to understand, like, yeah, I wasn't kidding when I said this organization was old. And yeah, this is the glint on the edge of the tip of the iceberg.
yeah, I just wanted to say something. Like, why does the U.S. have to export this? Why couldn't you export your Constitution?
It would have been nice,
Like,
wouldn't it?
what
We've
you could have like
been-
USAID, and it's just.
I don't know. I think that
told by our
they're
government that that's what they were doing for the last 80 years, when in fact they were exporting this shit.
I mean, I think that they want to tear down our Constitution too, Allison. So
I'll
I
tell
think
you why.
the last thing they want is for other countries to figure out the Constitution is a good idea. So they're not only subverting other countries by, like, essentially, doing all this shit, turning their men and women against each other and dividing them in whatever way they can, but they're also dividing them against us because, all the other Western countries look down on the United States, despite the fact that we have a constitution. And they're also working to undo that as well. How many times have we seen, women who have been propagandized to say, like, the Constitution is an old, dead, piece of paper and we should just burn it.
Written by dead
whatever.
white males.
Yeah, written by old racist white guys. So, I mean, it's not just that we're not exporting it, we're also attacking it. Like, freedom of speech and the Second Amendment are constantly getting attacked in this country.
You want to know why?
By weirdos, because they know that they can control us, and if they take away our guns, right, and our freedom of speech.
If you want to be at the top of the food chain, and you don't want anybody to be able to take you off the top of the food chain, but you don't want to be the best server of other people in the world, the best helper of other people in the world, the thing that you have to do is find a magic bullet that controls people. And that magic bullet is gynocentrism, right? So if you can control gynocentrism, which is what feminism is about, feminism is seizing the means of gynocentric production and gynocentric manifestation in the world. It is the communist version of using gynocentrism, right? There's other ways that people use gynocentrism. Traditionalism tries to find functional ways to use gynocentrism. I don't think it does very well. I think a lot of people do. I would disagree. I don't think there is a functional way to exploit gynocentrism. But in any case, that is why. And in order to exploit gynocentrism as effectively as humanly possible, you have to make it illegal to criticize gynocentrism. You have to present people who want genuine, open equality and genuine humanitarian equality as monsters who hate women and anti-gynocentrists, which, hello, I am an anti-gynocentrist, all right? I'm also a woman. I don't hate women. I think that women are really being held back by gynocentrism. But yeah, if you want to be the wealthiest and the most powerful and the most feared and the most in control of everybody in the world, you have to do this shit. You have to export feminism. If you export the Constitution, you will help the most people to not need you anymore. And they will forget about you, which is kind of what I want to happen in my life, to help the most people to independently not need me anymore to fix their problems so that I can go back to playing video games.
Yeah, statists don't want people to be free.
Yeah, I wanna help people then become a famous writer.
Yeah, I don't really want to be famous. I don't hate
Well,
it,
the
but
thing
I
is
don't
that
really
the
like it
thing is
either.
that when you become like a really popular writer, that means that it made a lot of people happy.
Yeah, that's
Mm.
true. Or made a lot of people think. I would like to
Yeah,
make a lot of people think. I just don't want I want them to think about something other than me.
yeah,
I
but
just want
but
to play video
basically
games.
that's sort of true. Like I think all of us
Yeah.
are like we do this because it's something that needs to get done. At least I do.
Yeah.
But we have other things we would probably rather be doing.
Yeah.
Like I would
Yeah.
rather be writing and drawing. I'm sure Brian would rather be doing his comic book. And it's not that this isn't important and it isn't good to help people, but
No, it's just we wish that feminism had not dumped this big pile of shit in the middle of the street of our culture so that we wouldn't have to be showing up with shovels to clean it up. Right?
yeah,
We're happy to do the job because it needs done. We're not happy that it needs done.
no. And just for those of you who don't know what gynocentrism is, it basically means that we care about women more than men. And it's patently obvious that we do. If you want, just do an experiment. Just imagine you can punch a man or you can punch a woman. Which would you prefer to do?
Yeah.
Which would you prefer to harm? And I know trolls will say the woman because they admit the same thing. All right, so we can continue with further going down the rabbit hole. I assume that there's even more organizations beyond PACT and the other ones.
Yeah, we can go further.
We
but
don't need
let's-
to do that today, but I would like to suggest anybody that doesn't really understand gynocentrism, if you want a good working definition for it, Peter Wright actually has had quite a bit to say on the subject at gynocentrism.com. And he's been really good in terms of researching the history of when it went from being our society went from being family oriented to being woman oriented. And so I think that knowing that history is very useful if you want to understand these issues.
Shaman King says Alison hates women. She said as much herself. I do it because people tell me not to. Like that's just sort of my nature. But aside from that, I see the shit but I have to remember that these aren't women. These are women in the grips of a cultural like this, all of this, when you present women as victims, it's a money spinner. So what has our culture done? It's grabbed that idea and ran with it. So now we have generations of women whose only functional cope in life is to present themselves as a victim or to see themselves as a victim. That's how they see they're empowered. And it's turning them into horrific people.
Yeah. Let's a good illustration of what's wrong, how gynocentrism also hurts women is this. All right. Let's imagine you have two athletes on the same track team, and for the sake of something that I actually know about, they both run the short hurdle race, the 100-meter hurdles. Right. So you have the male and the female. The female is already running the intermediate height hurdles instead of the high hurdles because biological differences, women are shorter than men on average. All right. But you say, all right, I want you to practice these hurdles by running this race 40 times during practice. And when you're done running it 40 times, then you can go home. And so the guy runs the hurdles 40 times, and maybe just for good measure, he runs an extra 10 times, right? The woman, she makes phone calls to her mom. She takes care of an animal that's off to the side of the track. She goes home to cook dinner and comes back, and she runs 8 times. And so she doesn't do anywhere near 40. And you're like, well, you had to do all those other things, so we're going to give you the same credit. You can still go home. You're done practicing. When you get to the end of the practice before the next race, and you discover that actually they're not running this as a gendered race, they're running in the same race against each other, which one of them do you think is going to win? Do you think it's going to be the one who ran the hurdles 40 times every practice, or the one who only ran 8 times? And the answer to that is, now you know why only 20% of CEOs are women, right? And gynocentrism is why the woman is getting away with that. Oh, she had to do all those other things. If a guy went off and did a bunch of other things instead of what the coach told him to, he'd get kicked off the team. But feminists use that excuse all the time. Well, women have all these other things. They should get paid the same as men for the same work. And we've had this for 50 years of this argument of women should be able to do a lot of things that are not work, that have nothing to do with work, as a substitute for their work, and still get paid the same. Women are held back by gynocentrism because they're not allowed to be held accountable by society in the same way that men are. They're not allowed to be pushed by society in the same way that men are. And so they do not develop the hardness. They do not develop the strength. They don't develop the discipline. They don't develop the knowledge and
consideration of others.
Consideration, right. And so you end up in a situation where then women feel like they're getting the short end of the stick, when in fact they broke their stick. And then nobody said, get another stick. Pick up something better. So that's why. Yeah, so I do recommend going and reading the introductory page of gynocentrism.com, though, to understand a little better.
Yeah. And I actually do appreciate the more looking at the more socialized aspects of gynocentrism, because I feel like saying that it's purely biological, it doesn't have a socialized component that can be moved, is giving up.
Yeah.
And I prefer not to give up, as you might have noticed over the years. Anyway, so we do have some super chows, Brian.
Yes, I know. I have them up and I want to read them. So
you are prepared.
I got some super chows. Yes. One from Great Indoors, who gives us $10 and says, please play the 30-second video. The Cure for Poverty Has a Name, Christopher Hitchens, and you will hear how deep and far the termites have dined. And okay. I believe I have it. Well, it's called The Solution of Poverty. I couldn't find it by that name, but I will share this tab. It's 30 seconds. So I hope this is the right one, but I'm just going to go ahead and play it. And let me just display it for the people in the vertical. It's going to be really small, but listen to the whole 30 seconds.
There is only one cure to...
Oh, well, I'm sorry. I muted the tab because I was opening it and I didn't want it to play while you guys were talking.
There is only one cure for world poverty that's ever been found or ever will be, and it's very simple. And it can be phrased very simply too. It's called the empowerment of women. Go to Bangladesh or Bolivia. I have to ask you to hold your applause, though I love you. Go to Bangladesh or Bolivia, give women control over their reproductive cycle, throw in a handful of corn if you can, make them not just the beasts of burden and the beasts of childbearing that they become, and the floor will rise, it just will. It never fails anyone.
Is that the video you meant for us to share?
I think so.
So there's something that, for some reason, men seem to have a very difficult time considering, at least outside the men's rights movement. Women have always had control over their reproductive cycle. There's never been a time when women have not had one thing that they could use to control their reproductive cycle, right? Who has the keys to the uterus? Right? It's not in someone else's body. It's in your body. So if you're in a family where poverty is an issue or could be an issue, and having a baby makes a difference, you also have a hole at the other end, and it talks, and you can have conversations with your husband about, we need to be more careful with this, and this is a bad time to do this, even if there's no birth control. Well, let's not do this week. Let's hold off until, and that greatly reduces the chances of getting pregnant. And that alone, women have been able to do for as long as we've known we had a menstrual cycle. And over the years, for centuries actually, there's been a development of ways to prevent semen from getting in. And women have always had the capacity to say, if we don't want another mouth to feed, wear that. Or I'm not going to do this if you don't wear that. Yeah. Right? So there's never been this idea that women have no control. It's whether or not women have discipline and whether or not women have diplomacy. The hardest part for women, diplomacy takes discipline.
Yeah. All right. So that was that super.
The presumption. Sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry, I was muted when I was talking. The presumption at the heart of that is that women don't because men just engage in sexual abuse or sexual violence, and that's not true.
Not a sustainable model for family.
No, it isn't. Because if you do that to like I don't know, a Nordic, if you judging from the Nordic sagas, if you did that in Scandinavia, you might just get a woman who kills your babies and feeds them to you. It's pretty horrific, but yeah.
That's just it. If men treated women throughout history the way feminists claim that men treated women throughout history, women would have revolted and killed men in their sleep, and that would have been the end of it.
Yeah, pretty much, and then that would have been the end of the human race. But okay, let's keep going.
All right, I got another super chow from Meredith G. And she gives us $5. Thank you, Meredith, and says, Rantzerker number 235, I believe the hypothesis of the book, The Lords of Poverty, the Power, Prestige, and Corruption of the International Aid Business is that aid is used as a means of oppressing a people to control them in foreign nations to control the resources of a country. Yes.
Yep, that's why they use distribution to women instead of distribution to men.
Yeah.
Because men are oriented toward solving problems for everybody. Women are oriented toward hoarding and only solving problems for themselves, and if their families are lucky, their families.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
All right, so that's all the super chows, I think, and there are no super chats or anything. So should we wrap it up?
Yeah, actually, Hannah's completely right. I was just walking that through in my mind because I've heard feminists complain that studies show that male leaders consider everybody in the community, not just women.
Yeah,
and female leaders just for the most part consider women. Which, you know what? That's a problem. All right. Yes, let's
absolutely.
Okay, so if you would like to support this analysis and support us continuing to be a thorn in the side of the Goliath, which has now been revealed to be a Goliath, please go to feedthebadger.com/support and help us out because we continue to exist almost solely because you guys help make sure that we can continue to create this content. And I mean, I'm sure we would have done it one way or another, some way else. It would just be at a much smaller scale. And a lot less often. But anyway, feedthebadger.com/support to help out the show to make sure we can continue to do this. And feedthebadger.com/justthetip if you want to send us a tip and a message with that tip. So yeah, back to you, Brian.
Okay, well, if you guys like this video, please hit like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, hit the bell for notifications, leave us a comment, let us know what you guys think about what we discussed on the show today. And please, please, please share this video because sharing is caring. Thank you guys so much for coming on today's episode of The Rantzerker with Hannah. And we'll talk to you guys in the next video.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.